All right, so in your final chapter here, we find out who was building the well in Naya's village. Now, if you have your study guide there, the irony, this would be an ironic resolution. So the resolution would be the ending of your story. And we could say that it is ironic because we were not expecting it to be Salva. When I read this the first time, I definitely did not expect it to be Salva. So remember, that would be irony. Something happened that the reader did not expect. That's why Naya's character was in our story, to bring it back to this ending of who was the group of workers. And what makes it even more ironic, we can say, is it surprised Naya as well. Because remember that Salva is Dinka. And a theme throughout this whole story was vengeance and conflict. So not only were the rebel groups and the army fighting, but then people in these tribal groups, if you were a Noor or a Dinka, they were fighting for control of these water holes, right? So in chapter 10, when Naya is observing the workers, she noted that she did not understand the language they were speaking. This was because it was Selva talking in English. That could be a little bit of foreshadowing. And then in chapter 13, Park foreshadows that Selva was the worker by stating, the boss would encourage workers and laugh and joke with them. If that didn't work, he would talk to them earnestly and try to persuade them. And if that didn't work, he would get angry. This quote shows that Salva was the boss because he had learned those leadership skills when he was on his journey as a lost boy, because he ended up taking over. And if you go to chapter 13, right? And that was the one where Naya was talking about Salva. And that would have also been around the same chapter where Selva had to leave the camp and walk for this very long time. So now he was 17 years old. And he talked about, here it is. So that's Naya seeing them. And here's Selva as people were getting taken by the currents. And as he started to walk, all those other boys ended up following him. Where was he supposed to go? He would walk south. Crowds of other boys followed him. Nobody talked about it, but by the end of the first day, Salva had become the leader of about 1,500 boys. And this would be the foreshadowing when he said how he had to talk with them and coax them and persuade them, just like Naya saw the guy doing, who was Salva. So we also had found out there was some foreshadowing after he had met with his dad. This is what he's doing when he says, I am here to talk to you about a project for South Sudan. So this foreshadows, or gives a hint, this foreshadows that Salva had plans to work on water drilling projects in South Sudan, but he needed money. Hence why he was doing these speaking things, these speaking engagements, because he would speak about it and then people would donate money so that he could go and do it. And remember, it was very dangerous to do this because not only the climate, and you would have these mosquitoes that can carry different, like yellow fever or malaria, but also the weather would have been very harsh, hot. You could have heat stroke, and then also when sometimes there'd be heavy rains. So he could only do this like half the year. Um, so also working quickly under pressure in order to help people in South Sudan. And now there'll be more time for girls like Naya to be able to go to school. There will be healthier living conditions, so people would be less sick. They can be more productive because when people are all sick and thirsty, they're not going to be working as productively as if they weren't sick or thirsty. So that would be that. And if you were going to write something, I had wrote down here. I really enjoy reading this book because of the 2 points of view. Salva's story began in 1985 and ended in 2009, while Naya's story began in 2008 and ended in 2009. Naya's story shows how ravaged the region is from the war that Salva survived. I also like how Salva returned to South Sudan in order to help people, including those that are in the opposition tribe. It is very obvious that Salva's experience as a child influenced his life as an adult because he dedicated his life to helping people. There were many who refused to help Salva, but the few that did were very memorable to him. That is why he chose to be one of the few that helps others by going to a dangerous region to build wells for those in need. And then you can also work on a central idea paragraph, so there could be lots of central ideas. A central idea would look like this. You could say central idea examples. So one could be we could say the novel's central idea is the importance of resilience when faced with difficult situations. And then we talk about how Salva was characterized as determined and resilient, and that is what got him through this situation. The central idea of the novel shows how wars can be especially especially traumatizing for children because they can be separated from their families, and that would be Salva being separated. Another central idea, we could say something about water and war in general. Like, many people do not often consider the lasting effects war has on a region, specifically when it comes to infrastructure and we'll just leave that. And then you could talk about how the reason that Naya's life was so difficult, even though, well, technically there was still conflict going on, but for a little while, in the early 2000s, there wasn't conflict in South Sudan, but you could say it was still, things still didn't get built that would have been helpful for the infrastructure. Because also the money, there wouldn't have been really people to build it because people might have been killed or disabled when the war was going on. So you could have a central idea about how wars don't just hurt the combatants and the soldiers, but it can also leave decades of damage. And then you could talk about the conflict that would be developed through Naya's conflict of not being able to find water to drink. And that would be our novel, A Long Walk to Water.